Final Fantasy 16 may very well end up as my game of the year, but let's talk about it. So I'm a little past the halfway point for 16, I think. Though funnily enough, the PS5 may say 70%, so And the game has just gotten better and better. I finished the Titan section and I'm on to the next part. And I'm going to be as spoiler-free as I can, but I'll be using some footage from various fights that I've done up to this point. And yeah, speaking of those fights, by the way, oh my god! They just get better and better! I think the standout for me so far is the ability the game has at weaving bombastic, high adrenaline, fast-paced action scenes while still having fun and interesting mechanics. I'm going to talk about this later on, but you can definitely feel the Final Fantasy XIV inspiration in this game. It keeps me engaged both physically, with the mechanical inputs that I do, and visually. Whereas for a lot of other games, heck, even Final Fantasy XV for example, the cooler a fight is visually, the more simplistic and one-dimensional the actual mechanics can often become, as I want you to focus more on the spectacle of it all, and on the visual side of things instead of paying attention to your button inputs. Think the Leviathan fight from Final Fantasy XV, where you're fighting across the entire city, but realistically what the fight actually amounts to is you floating in the air and holding the attack button. It looks cool, but mechanically feels very uninspired. But that's not the case here. These bosses have unique mechanics and patterns that I have to learn and counter. The fights change, especially on those rare occasions that I use Ifrit for an icon fight. Because Ifrit fights very similarly to Clive, at least up to now, just without the icon abilities. But even now, I'm starting to get those abilities. At least Ifrit versions of them. You're fast, each hit feels very impactful, but you can still weave magic bursts into your rotation. I think the timing's a little bit different, so I'm trying to get used to that, but there is still a skill ceiling here. It's not the highest ever, but it doesn't need to be. You can get good at dodging, learn your aerial combos, and you can execute them better. It's a simplified version of Clive's gameplay, but not so egregiously, so where the combat loses its signature flair and charm. And it's not overutilized. It doesn't overstay its welcome and leaves you both satisfied and wanting more, like a good meal. The fights themselves have various phases, so the mechanics get fleshed out and become more interesting while keeping you on your toes. And getting new icons for new abilities gives you a great sense of progression. As you gain new tools in your kit, you can pick and choose to your own interests. Master various skills so that you can use them regardless of what icon you have equipped. You expand on your options, and it's clear they elected to go for more player agency instead of having this be more of a linear progression system. You choose the playstyle you want, the abilities you prefer, and how you want to upgrade them. Or at least how you want to allocate your ability points. Personally, I elected to go for Phoenix, Titan, and Ramuh, and I can hit pretty dang hard with those. Especially as I'm someone who tries and prioritize perfect dodges and parries with Titan's abilities. I think my main critique with the game, funnily enough, comes in this midway part of the progression though, as it kind of slows down. I'm not really spending ability points because, well, I've upgraded everything I wanted to, so I'm just kind of saving up for the next icon that I unlock. But even then, I can only use 3 at a time, so I can just take the points back from the one that I'm dropping and put those points on the new one. So I just got this pool of ability points that I'm not really doing anything with, and it's dragged the progression to a bit of a hole. And yeah, I'm with another content creator, Preach Gaming, on this issue. I'm not big on the crafting system. It definitely feels like it's tacked on, and I think if there were more options and more builds that you could elect to go for, then it would have some value in existing, but it just kind of feels like a linear form of progression with a different coat of paint on it. It's not offensive by any means, like it doesn't detract or taint my experience or anything. It's just kind of like, say, a cup of water at a meal. You aren't gonna walk away from the delicious meal reminiscing about how good the water was, right? Or let's just say if you were, then that says more about the meal itself. But I'm not going to walk into or out of Final Fantasy XVI thinking about the crafting system. It's just kind of there. But early game, my one concern was level design and how overly linear many of the areas were. And that's completely gone away for me. It's not an open world game like Final Fantasy 15, but it doesn't have to be. But god, do I love what they've done here with some of these zones. They're just pretty. Only a few of the zones have blown me away, such as the Forest Zone, or right outside Orfla, since that reminds me a lot of Yulmore and Colucia overall from Shadowbringers in Final Fantasy 14. But the game overall is still very pretty, and it's nice to have some size on these zones, and some room to operate. Now, there are some resources that you can collect from these places, and some chests. But what these zones are mainly used for is to be populated with either quest objectives, crafting materials, or hunts. And if you played Final Fantasy 14, you know what hunts are, because it's the same system, pretty much. And if you haven't, well, allow me to explain. They are basically one-off boss fights in the overworld, when you are given a hint where they generally are, and then you have to go looking for them. And these fights are genuinely pretty fun. I just fought my first S-rank hunt, Atlas, and he has some interesting mechanics to him. I died once, even though I was kind of like annihilating him, because I got too greedy, and I let him hit me too many times and I didn't heal up. But these hunts are really fun side content, because they lean on the strengths of the game and the combat system, having diverse boss fights where you have to flex your muscle memory recognition muscles, or just your memory recognition muscles overall, to learn the patterns, learn when to dodge, learn when to capitalize on hitting the boss. Oh hey, I know that when he does this mechanic has a brief cooldown period afterwards, I can hit him with a Titan charged up punch in that period of time, without worrying about getting hit myself. And funnily enough, there's some A-rank hunts that I think were even harder than the S-rank that I did. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting better at 16, or I'm just more, let's say, alert, like I was more awake during the S-rank fight than I was for the A-ranks, but I still like them a lot. Now the side quests, I think they're very hit or miss overall. Some are genuinely engaging and engrossing and add to the complexities of the overworld as you learn just a little bit more about the relationships and dynamics at play. And then others just feel like filler quests that serve to just elongate your playtime. They are optional, so it's like whatever, but I feel if the side quests were all of the quality as those in Sanbreque, you know, the ones that made the rounds on the internet for being massively depressing, I feel that the game would be better off for that. There was one side quest that I did kind of like, though I was still kind of zoning in and out, because I didn't know what to expect, where I learned more about Quentin and his past. Quests like that are genuinely good content that flesh out the world and the cast of characters. It made me care more about Quentin, who was a character I was just kind of bleh for before that point. He was just kind of there. Now, you're like, oh, I know his story, it's kind of interesting, I'm more engaged with this world because of that. And I think my main takeaway so far with Final Fantasy 16, coming off of that discussion, is how much 14 is coded into this game's very DNA. Its overall story structure, kind of reminiscent to the trial system from Final Fantasy 14, where you have big fight, bit of world building, ramp up to the boss fight, new boss fight, rinse repeat. It's not always like that, but generally speaking, the way the game develops characters and utilizes music, very Final Fantasy 14 feeling. The actual aspects of the world and how it works, certain parallels that exist between 14 and 16 like Sanbreque, being kind of like 16's version of Ishgard, combined with Yulmore. The game at the end of the day feels like a passion project by a group of people who are finally given the opportunity to make a story without limitations, either internal or external. They don't have to preserve aspects of the game's world in service of an MMORPG. They can kill off characters, they can kill off main characters, they can destroy locations, they can have the world map itself change and ebb and flow. They don't have to restrict the tone or visuals to be in accordance to a T rating. They can just let loose and lay it all on the proverbial table and go all in with their creativity, and it shows not only in the stylized, silky smooth combat, but also in these story scenes that feel jam-packed with emotions on the whole. I don't know about you, but personally they felt very natural to me. Almost as if the series itself was aging right alongside with me, becoming more mature. It's tackling themes and concepts in ways they couldn't do it before, that make me glad that the game is rated M. There's some parts that have cropped up relatively recently that felt kind of oddly like filler, mainly the parts involving a character by the name of Mid. Yes, trust me, I've joked about the name plenty of times on stream. Arguably too many times. But it's in like these weird little quest lines where the pace kind of grinds to an abrupt halt right after a big climactic moment as you help her out. Now, they are trying to utilize these scenes for some character development, fleshing out some of the other cast members who don't get as much time in the sun, and it seems to be building up to something. But right now, without knowing exactly what that is, I kind of have a feeling I know what it is. It feels like this sort of stuff could have been handled either quicker or in side quests. But I'm going to let them cook, and I'm going to hear them out on this. Because it's not like there's nothing good about them. There is some good follow-up to certain events that happened before in the story, and how they affected various characters. And they may use scenes like those as a way for you as Clive to go off with one character or the other to flesh out that dynamic and just do basically, hey, after all this happened, how we both feeling about this? That to me has value, and that is intrinsically Final Fantasy XIV Creative Business Unit 3 method of character development and story building, where they are not afraid to have these scenes that on the surface may be similar to or even taken as filler to some people, but in the grand scheme of things afterwards, you'll look back on them and be like, hey, this was pretty dang good character development that really helped me care more about the cast of characters on the whole. And I'm super excited to see where the story goes from here and how it ends. Because already I'm like, I want to follow up to the story somehow. I want more Valisthea. That's my main takeaway so far. I'm like, this world is really cool, really compelling. I love how it works. I need more of it. So I'm going to call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe. Have a great day. Hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Stay safe. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.